Most men don't realize their wife has lost attraction until it's already gone. And the reason it happens is almost never what you think it is. I remember in my own marriage a few years ago, there was this pattern that I couldn't see clearly until it had already done quite a bit of damage in my relationship. Whenever my wife Kate was struggling, I would go quiet. You know, I'd push down what I was feeling. I'd set aside what my needs were. I'd tell myself I was being a good husband. This idea of she was going through enough. I didn't want to be a burden. The last thing she needs is my stuff on top of hers. That's just adding more stress. From the outside, it probably looked like strength. But from the inside, I knew what it actually was. I was hiding. Not from her, but from the discomfort of being fully present while my wife was struggling, while also being honest about my own experience. It was easier in those moments for me to stay useful than to be real. So I managed. I stayed calm. I asked what she needed. I handled things. The whole time, I wasn't really there emotionally. Kate was struggling and I was right next to her. And somehow we both felt completely alone. I thought I was protecting her. I'll tell you what was actually happening in a minute, because understanding that distinction changed everything for me. And I think it will change things for you as well, so that you can make a difference if your marriage feels lonely. My name is Eric McDougall. I'm a certified master relationship coach trained under Terry Real, and I work with married men in long-term marriages who still deeply love their wives, but feel disconnected or even invisible in their marriage. If you're watching this, you're probably not the guy who checked out. You didn't leave. You probably didn't even stop trying. You're here because you're still in it and something just feels off, almost like you can't reach your wife. Maybe you both feel more like roommates than lovers right now. Maybe you feel like a problem that she has to manage, or like you're never getting it right. Maybe on paper you're doing everything right, and somehow it still feels like you're not measuring up. If that's the case, this video is for you. I'm going to give you the most honest explanation I know for why this is happening, where the drift comes from, why good men end up here, and what you can actually do about it. By the end of this video, I'm going to give you 5 specific shifts you can make this week that will start changing the dynamic in your marriage. Not eventually, this week. So let's get into it. And before we go any further, here's the thing that might be the hardest to hear. Most men lose their wife emotionally years before they realize it's actually happening. Not because they stop caring, because they actually stop showing up as themselves. It's almost like they lost themselves in the relationship. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to become their wife's roommate. It actually happens in inches, over years, through 1,000 small decisions that are each made perfect sense in the moment. And at the center of almost every single one of these decisions is the same quiet belief: make her happy and things will be okay. That belief typically comes from a good place, but it starts a drift that most men don't catch until the damage is already done. And here's the part a lot of good husbands don't want to hear. Here are 3 behaviors that show up in almost every disconnected marriage I've worked with. See if you recognize yourself in some of these, because they are not good for your relationship. The first one is being chronically defensive. Right? He stopped making decisions. He stopped talking about where he wants to go, what he wants to do. He's constantly asking his wife, what do you want to do this weekend? What are you up to this weekend? How should I handle the kids? How are we going to deal with this? This man tends to ask every single time, and he's doing it because he thinks he's being considerate. What actually happened is he handed her the wheel and decided to move to the passenger seat. And she didn't want the wheel. She wanted to trust him to take the wheel. Over time, leading the family probably exhausted her. And to be honest, she most likely started losing respect for you without even knowing why. The second behavior is choosing peacekeeping over telling the truth. Every time things get tense, this man backs down. Not because he was calm, but because he was afraid. Every fold send the same message. My position isn't worth holding. So she stopped feeling like she could lean on him. Because you can't lean on something that's constantly moving every time you push it a little bit. So ask yourself honestly, when you back down in a disagreement, is it because you genuinely reconsidered your position? Or is it because you couldn't handle the tension or the conflict of where you thought it was going to go? That distinction matters because most men never even realize that difference. Now, behavior number 3 is about approval monitoring. And this is one of the sneakiest. In my experience, to be honest, it's probably the most destructive as well. This is a man who's constantly reading his wife's mood, almost like the weather report. He adjusts everything based on her emotional temperature. His sense of okayness depends on her mood. He doesn't realize he's even doing it, but she can feel it. When you outsource your internal state to your wife's reactions, you make her responsible for two people's emotional lives. And that leads to emotional exhaustion. And that exhaustion kills intimacy and leads her to pull away from the relationship. So, where does that come from? Why do good men end up here? That's what I want to dig into next. And I want to give this pattern a name, right? You can call it the nice guy trap based on Dr. Glover's work. Because the men I work with aren't lazy or indifferent. They're actually the opposite. They're trying too hard and they're moving in the wrong direction. They got here because of three specific things, right? The first root of this problem is he was taught wrong. Most men in their 30s and 40s grow up watching one of two models: a father who was dominated by his mother, or a father who was absent in the home. Neither one showed him what healthy masculine leadership looks like in a committed marriage. So he overcorrected. He decided he would be different than his dad. He would be more considerate, more flexible, more available. And those are all good instincts. But without a real model of healthy masculine leadership, those instincts got applied in the wrong places. He learned to manage his wife instead of lead her. He deferred instead of decided. He suppressed instead of shared. The second root is he confused compliance with love. He absorbed a belief somewhere that a good husband makes his wife happy. They minimize conflict. They keep things nice and smooth. That's not love. Again, that's management. And managed relationships don't produce intimacy. They produce a functional, comfortable, transactional marriage. What he built was a marriage optimized for her comfort. And in doing that, he removed any possibility of genuine connection and created a lot of boredom. Root number 3 is he outsourced his identity. And this is the deepest one. He stopped knowing who he was outside of his roles. I see this in so many men. You're a husband, you're a father, you're a provider. Sure, those are real, but they're responsibilities. They're not your identity. When a man's sense of self lives entirely in how well he's fulfilling in these roles and how the people around him feel about him, he has no center. And a man without a center cannot lead. He can only react. His entire self-esteem is based on things outside of himself. And this is the foundation of everything I'm about to explain. There's a principle that really ties this all together. This principle is going to explain why these three behaviors killed attraction, possibly in your marriage. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's a good thing because it allows you to create change. So I want to introduce you to a concept that changed the way I understood my marriage entirely. Attraction in a long-term relationship doesn't run on compatibility. It doesn't run on fairness, on shared calendars, or how well you co-parent together. It actually runs on felt safety, on, the difference between a grounded, stable presence and a reactive, approval seeking one. So think about a battery. It needs two poles to generate power. And the charge actually lives in between the difference. So it lives in between them. You remove one pole, right? You don't get a smaller battery. You actually just get nothing at all. It's not able to keep a charge. And that's what happens in a marriage when that charge collapses. This looks like a marriage where nobody's fighting, nobody hates each other. There's just flatness. It's functional, like roommates who used to be in love. And there's a famous teacher out there named David Deida. He has written about this way more cleanly than almost anyone else, right? His book, which is very popular, The Way of the Superior Man, is one of the most important books I've read as a husband and as a coach. You can go grab it. His core idea is this: what a woman is most attracted to is a man's depth of presence, not his achievement, not his compliance, his presence, his groundedness, his ability to stay stable and fully here without needing her to regulate him. When you deferred to avoid conflict, when you traded grounded presence for approval seeking, when you kept the peace instead of told the honest truth, did it again. When you monitored her mood to decide how you felt, you handed her your emotional stability and made her responsible for it. This is what borrowed functioning is all about. And she can feel that, not always consciously, but she knows it in her body. And that's going to impact how safe she feels trusting you. And here's the thing that nobody tells men out there: the more you manage her happiness, the less she's going to trust you. The more you defer to keep the peace, the more contempt builds quietly underneath for her. She doesn't want a man she can push around. She wants a man she can push against. And those are completely different things. A man who can be moved off his position by his woman's emotional state has already lost her respect. Not because she's cruel, because her nervous system is wired to feel safe with a man who has a center. When you fold every time she pushes, you're not communicating love. You're actually communicating that there's nobody home. And in those moments, she really can't feel you. And that's a problem for her in terms of connection. Now, remember what I told you at the beginning, the pattern I noticed in myself when Kate was struggling in our marriage. I talked about how I was hiding, I was protecting her from my emotions, right? From my needs, from my internal experience. I was telling myself I was being a good husband. What I eventually did was this. I sat down with Kate and I talked. I didn't talk about her. I talked about me. And I was real. Talked about my fears, my struggles, what I had been carrying and not saying, what I had wanted for us, what I had been avoiding, what I actually desired from our marriage. And I used I statements. I spoke from my own experience like a mature, capable man. And I was honest without managing how she received it. And honestly, she didn't respond right away. It was a couple days that went by and I got nothing. And honestly, I'll be real with you. There was a part of me in those moments that just like thought I made a mistake. I got to take this all back. To go back and just be that steady, quiet, capable, stoic guy who never rocked the boat. That felt safer for me. But I had made the decision about who I was going to be. So I committed to that. I remember it was probably a week later, Kate came to me. She told me how disconnected she had felt, how alone, how much she had wanted to connect with me, but didn't know how. Because She saw me as, you know, always seeming like I was somewhere else in my head. Like there was a version of me that she could see but couldn't reach. And in that moment, I sat there and I realized something. I thought I had been protecting her from my emotions, from my burdens, from my needs. But while I was busy protecting her from me, she was alone. She was reaching for me and she was finding nobody home. And we both felt incredibly lonely at that time in our marriage, in the same house, in the same bed, married together, but miles apart. And my silence wasn't my strength, it was a wall. And Kate had been on the other side of that wall for years. And I remember that conversation was the start of the solution, right? It wasn't a magic fix, it didn't happen overnight, but it cracked something open between us that had been sealed in me for a long time. It started a process that has led to the marriage Kate and I have today. And I'll tell you honestly, we both believe our marriage right now is better than it's ever been. And I'm talking about all areas of it. Not despite going through that hard stretch, but because of it. If what I just described sound like your marriage, I want to point you towards something important right now. I'm giving you a free resource you can grab. I call it the Connection Blueprint. It walks you through the exact patterns that create disconnection in a marriage and gives you a clear starting point for what to do about them. It's totally free, takes 10 minutes to read through. And honestly, I've had a lot of men reach out to me after going through this. Like it was the first time they actually understood what was happening in their relationship. You can grab that link in the description below. It's my gift to you. Keep watching because, I still have 5 shifts that I want to walk you through so you can do something this week. And I want to name something before we get to these specific solutions. Everything I just described, the deference, the peacekeeping, the approval monitoring, a lot of this all has the same root. It's rooted in the man who stopped showing up as himself in his own marriage, right? The term that comes to mind for me is performative masculinity. It's the man who plays the role of a strong husband without actually ever being present as a real person. He's stoic, he's capable, he's reliable, he handles his business, he never complains, he never burdens anyone. And inside, that man probably feels completely alone. I've seen so many of my clients in this stance. Why? Because it's a performance. It's a mask that you learn to wear so long that you forgot it wasn't your actual face. And here's what that mask tends to cost a man. Not just connection, not just intimacy, but his wife's trust. Because she doesn't know who she's actually married to. She knows the role, but she doesn't know the real man. Your wife doesn't need you to be strong for her all the time. Sometimes she needs you to be real with her. And those are not always the same thing. The man behind the mask is the man she's trying to access. That's who she misses. And most of the time, she doesn't even know how to tell you that. Here's 5 shifts. These are not concepts. These are actual behaviors, things that you can start doing this week. And I want to frame these for you before we go through them because they actually build on each other. The first 2 are about behavior, what you do differently in specific moments. The next 2 are about presence, how you show up day to day. And then the last one is about identity. This is who you decide to be at your core. And honestly, it's the one that typically makes the other 4 fall into line. Right? So just remember that. Level 1 is behavior. The first shift is lead one decision a day. Every day this week, make one decision without asking permission or input. Choose what to make for dinner and make it. Plan something on the weekend. Where you're taking the family on the Saturday or Sunday. It honestly, it doesn't have to be big, but it has to be your decision. And tell her, don't ask, hey, we're going to this place on Saturday. I think you're going to love it. For a lot of men, this will feel uncomfortable at first, right? Good. That discomfort is information. It tells you exactly how far the drift has gone because that tension you're feeling means something is changing. The goal isn't to become a dictator here. The goal is to rebuild your decision making muscle. You lost it by not using it, and you tend to get it back by using it more. The second shift is hold your position under pressure. Now, the next time she pushes back on something that you said or decided, don't fold immediately. Stay with it. Not with aggression, not with defensiveness, but with calm certainty. You can say something like, I hear you, and I still think this is the right call. That's it. You're not dismissing her. You're not, going against her. You're just holding your ground. And again, the first few times, this might feel like conflict's coming up. It isn't. It's what we call differentiation. And differentiation is what actually creates intimacy. She doesn't need you to agree with her. She needs to know there's someone real on the other side of this conversation. Now let's move to level 2, which is presence. Okay, so the third shift is stop monitoring her mood. The next time you walk into a room where she's present, don't read her face first. Don't adjust your energy based on hers. Don't get in your head and start mind mapping her. Just walk in as yourself. Just be grounded. Be just you. If she's in a difficult place, you don't have to fix it. You can acknowledge it and then just stay steady and be present. Something like, hey, looks like you got something going on. I'm here if you want to open up about it. And then just go back to being yourself. This single shift does more for the polarity in your marriage than almost anything else you can do. Because it shows her there's a man in the house who doesn't need her to be okay in order to function. So she doesn't have to hide those parts of her anymore. And to her, that's deeply safe and attractive. The fourth shift is pursue her without needing her response. Start pursuing your wife again. Not to fix the distance, not to get something back, but because you genuinely want her. Send her a specific text in the middle of the day. Not, how's your day going? Something real, something that has some teeth to it, something that shows you were thinking about her specifically. Plan a date. Not, what do you want to do on Friday? You plan. Hey, I'm taking you to dinner this Friday. Can you be ready at 7? Wear something nice. When she doesn't respond the way you hope, don't collapse, don't withdraw. Just don't make it mean something about you. Keep being the man who decides to pursue his wife every day in a genuine way. The consistency of that is what lands, not the single time you do it. Now, the third level we're talking about is identity. And so for this fifth shift, you want to reconnect to your own direction. This is the one that makes the other 4 actually work, right? So don't skip it because it might feel less tangible or more ambiguous. Get clear on where you're going, not just as a husband, not just as a father, but as a man. Start thinking about your edge. What are you building? What do you stand for? What would your life look like if you were fully alive in it? Here's why this matters so much. The deference, the peacekeeping, the approval monitoring, they all come from the exact same place. They come from the core of a man who doesn't have a strong enough sense of himself to hold his ground in a relationship. A man whose identity is built entirely around how well others are responding to him. When you reconnect to your own direction, you solve the root problem, not just the symptoms. And a man with a clear sense of who he is and where he's going is a different presence in the home. His wife can feel it. His kids can feel it. He doesn't have to perform strength because he is strong. Now, this week, write down 3 things: what you're building, what you value, and what kind of man you want to be in 5 years from now. You don't have to share it with anybody yet. Just do it for yourself. That clarity is the foundation of everything else that gets built on. And that's where I started too. Now, I want to say one last thing before we wrap up. The man I've been describing in this video, the one who defers, keeps the peace, who monitors moods, who hides behind the mask of being a good husband, he didn't get to that place because he was weak. He got there because he loves his family. He was doing what he was taught. He was doing what he thought a good man was supposed to do. And here's what I know about men like that. They don't need to be fixed. They actually just need to be reminded. You need to be reminded of the version of you that your wife fell in love with. You know, the version of me that my wife fell in love with had an edge, had direction. That version didn't need permission to be himself. I pursued her. I felt my ground. And that same man is still in you. He didn't leave, he just got quiet. So the question isn't whether or not you can get back to him, because you can. The question is whether you're willing to stop making her comfort more important than your integrity. She doesn't need you to be comfortable all the time. She needs you to be real because she wants to feel you. So stop protecting her from yourself. That's not love. That's just the wall. Show up, tell the truth, lead with your whole self, and trust her enough to meet you there. And I'll leave you with this. Attraction didn't die in your marriage. It suffocated under years of you trying to keep the peace, under years of deferring and managing and shrinking yourself down to keep everybody else around you comfortable. You didn't fail your marriage by being a bad man. You failed it by disappearing inside of it. So stop managing your wife, stop managing your relationship, and start showing up as that man again. That's the whole thing. Now, there's a layer underneath everything I talked about today that most men never even look at. The deeper reason why the drift starts in the first place, the wound underneath the pattern, the thing that makes most men, abandon their own presence without even knowing that it's happening. And that's what my next video digs into. So subscribe so you don't miss it. And again, you can grab that free connection blueprint in the description below. I'll see you in the next one.